Hello and welcome back to the Jolly Ranchers YouTube channel. I am a solo developer making a murder mystery RPG called Kid Detective. It follows all the parameters of Game Maker's Toolkit's video on what makes a good detective game, and I'm extremely excited about it. It will be coming to Kickstarter soon, but until then, if you like these videos and you want to support me, please wishlist it on Steam, link in the description below. Today, we will be covering clickable objects in a Monkey Island style game. Your character already knows how to move. You will walk to anything in the environment and you will say some sort of dialogue about it, as you do in adventure games. We're going to be using a free visual scripting tool called Fungus to accomplish this. It comes built in with clickable sprites and draggable sprites, but we are going to be tinkering with the clickable sprites so that they function as you might expect in a Monkey Island style game. Without further ado, please like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get into it. Okay, first things first, we are going to go to the Fungus GitHub today because Fungus is currently being updated on the asset store and you cannot get it there at the moment. But this gives us an opportunity to download the newest version of Fungus, which was not yet on the asset store and is on its way. And instead, we're going to go down here and we are going to download this one right here, Fungus v3.13.7.unity package. Just go ahead and download that guy. It will presumably show up in your downloads folder. Remember that for later. Okay, and when you have downloaded that, you're going to go to Import Package and then Custom Package, and it is going to bring up your File Explorer of whatever kind, Finder if you're on Mac, and you're going to navigate to your downloads folder, find that Fungus package that you just imported, and you're going to get it on in here. I'm not going to press open right now, but if I did, it would show me a box where you could select the things that you want to import from Fungus, and I would just say import all. And then it'll take some time as everything imports. But when you're done, you will go up here to your new tools option on your toolbar. It'll say Fungus, and you can create all these wonderful fungus things. As you can see, I've already created a flowchart, and in this flowchart, this is where we will handle stuff like dialogue, stuff like moving the camera, perhaps, is very easy to do in Fungus. In fact, there is a massive list of commands here. We can change animations, we can play sound effects and music, we can move the camera, we can control variables, if statements. We can do a whole lot. But one of them is a dialogue box, this say command, and one of them is a branching narrative button, which is this menu command. And those are going to come in handy, let me tell you. But first, because all good point-and-click adventure games involve clickable objects, we're going to go back up here to Tools, Fungus, Create, and click on this clickable sprite. And let's go into our scene view. And as you can see, we've created a giant mushroom. We can go ahead and instantly remove that. I'm just going to type in none here and select none because I don't want to click on a giant mushroom today. Not today. So here's our clickable 2D script. We are going to be modifying this slightly, and I'll show you why. But let's check out the functionality it already has. It comes with a box collider, which we can edit here. We've already edited colliders on this series. We can remove this component if we want to by pressing on these three dots over here, saying remove component, and we can replace it with a polygon collider if we want to. But for now, I will just use the box collider, and I am going to set this up on our desk in our scene. So let me do that real quick. Okay, now that the box collider is set up on the desk itself, I'm going to go ahead and name this clickable sprite because we're going to keep this around even though we're going to modify the script itself. I'm going to name this desk clickable. You know, like a smart person would, this is a chair, so I'm going to rename this chair. Because I'm trying to be smart and make sure that I teach good organization. Because if you're working with anyone else or you're working with yourself, you are going to want to be more organized than you are now. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this desk clickable under the desk object itself. The box collider still appears to be in position, and that is great. Something I want to go ahead and do before we test out what the clickable object does itself is I am going to want to check this box use event system. This clickable 2D started out using the old Unity event system, but I want to use the new one because if you click on something and there's an overlapping UI object in the way, if I use the new event system, the click will not register underneath the UI. Say we pull up the inventory, but there's a clickable object underneath it. We don't want to click that clickable object. We want to click on only the inventory, and when we close the inventory, we want to be able to click on things in the scene again. So, as you can see here, I need to add a physics 2D raycaster in my main camera object in order to use this. So I'm going to go ahead and click this, and before I forget, I'm going to go to the main camera. I'm going to go down here to add component. I'm going to add a physics 2D raycaster. And now for the clickable object to do anything, we are going to need to create a new block in our flowchart. So you can go up here to this plus button and add a new block, or what I like to do is right click and add block. I'm going to name this clickable, and I'm going to make a path by doing a backslash, and I am going to name this clickable / desk. This is going to help organize workflow later on if you put things in categories like this with the backslash. And just to test this out, for now, I am going to put a say command, and this is going to bring up a text box on screen, and I'm going to say, wow, what a fancy pantsy desk. Wow, what a fancy pantsy desk. And what you need to make sure that you do, and something that I definitely didn't do just now as a mistake, was you need to go up here to execute on event, because when you object clicked, you want this block to occur. And it asks for a clickable object, and so we have made one, and we're gonna take it from the hierarchy and we're gonna drag it in here. Another thing you can do is you can click on this circle over here, and it'll bring up the clickable 2Ds you have in your scene, and you can choose from them. So I'm gonna drag my desk clickable in there, and now it will execute our dialog box. So we can move around, and we click on the desk. Wow, what a fancy pantsy desk. So a couple things. This is amazing. This functionality is amazing already. I have an entire video that shows you how to customize this dialog box and all the things you can do with it. I will link it in the description. But some things that we don't like is that the dialog fires as soon as we click on it. Our character doesn't walk up to it and then say, wow, what a fancy pantsy desk. It kind of ruins the illusion because we are seeing that it's a fancy desk from all the way over here. Or if we wanted to look inside a drawer and say like, oh my gosh, Kevin, the boss, has a knife in here. Oh no. Then it would kind of break the illusion if we said that from all the way over here and we hadn't looked in the desk yet. Or we played a sound effect of us rummaging in the desk drawer. If I went to audio, play sound, and I played the audio of us rummaging through the desk drawer and we hadn't even walked over and stopped by the desk yet, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. There's one other thing we're going to be modifying about the clickable object as well. if we click anywhere on the screen right now, the dialog box will go away. And wherever we click on the screen, we're going to move towards, or perhaps we're going to click on another object. So we kind of want to disable our movement while the text box is going. So there's one more problem with the clickable object, which is that if I go up here and create a say dialog, and I come in here and I change the dialog input so that when we click on the text box itself, the dialog will move on, as opposed to clicking on the entire screen, anywhere on the screen, and the dialog moves on. Then we begin to see some of the problem we're going to have. What a fancy-pantsy desk. And I can just freely walk around, and I'm still in the midst of dialogue. So this could be something you want, and you don't want to change, and that will be simple. You just won't follow the part of this tutorial that changes that. But a lot of people want their player to stay stationary in a cutscene. Let's say you want to play some specialized animation in the middle of your cutscene. And then when I clicked on the dialogue to move through the conversation, I moved to where the dialogue box was. It's kind of a problem. Most people would consider that an unpolished game, but if you're just looking for simple functionality, then it's here. But I'm going to show you how to go a step further. First things first, we are going to go to our clickable object that we made, and we are going to go to the clickable 2D script that is on this game object in the inspector, and we are going to double click it to open it up in Visual Studio. So if we go in the clickable 2D script, there's going to be one thing that we want to attach to every clickable 2D object that we have, and that is going to be a variable. I'm going to have this be a public float called activate distance. And this is all we're going to do for now, because we're going to have this variable do something in another script. And what this variable is going to say is that wherever the player is in our scene, as soon as they reach a certain distance around the object, that's when this block in our flowchart will be executed. So we can have a little bit more control over when the player starts talking about the object that you've clicked on, talking to the person that perhaps you've clicked on. You could have the activate distance be quite close, or you could have something like this view here out the window be clickable from any distance, and the player stops and admires the view from wherever they are in the room. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility and control. Back in our script, the thing that handles when we do pointer click, which is silly, the thing that handles that is this script called object clicked. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to click on that, and it will open up the object clicked script. And this is where we're going to do most of our changes to the Fungus script itself. And inside our object clicked script, the first thing we're going to want to do, I'll go to the top so that you can scroll down with me. The first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go under this event dispatcher variable. I'm going to press enter twice, and we are going to add a private reference to our point and click player script that we've been working on. Now, I believe mine is called target because I was a fool. So my point and click script that's on my player is named target. That is a bad name for it. I would name it something like point and click controller if I were you. But for the purpose of this video, I will be referencing a script called target. You will type in whatever the name of your script is there, and I am going to name it target. And it doesn't know which script we're talking about. So as we've done before, we are going to add a start method. And if you press enter, it fills it in for you because it loves the start method. And we are going to say that our variable, which we could have named anything, but we named it target, is going to be find object of type, because there is only one player in our scene. If you have copies of players in your scene, you might run into an issue if you have more than one player in your scene. But for me, I only have one, so I'm going to say target equals find object of type target, put parentheses, and that. And the reason we need this reference to our player is because we are going to calculate the distance to our clickable object and determine when we do execute block. So I'm going to go into this do execute block method, which is what executes the block after you click on something. And I am going to put in a while statement. This while statement will help us bide the time until we reach the activate distance to our clickable object. So this while statement will just bide time until we reach the distance. And if we never reach it, then we'll have a way to get out of the while statement. So for this while statement, we're going to need to calculate distance, which I'm going to do with the vector3.distance method, because we will be calculating the coordinates between the clickable object. So whatever object we click will be passed in here, as we can see up here, because this object click method is called whenever we do pointer click, and it passes in this clickable object. So it knows exactly what object we clicked, and so we can reference its distance from the player. So clickable object dot transform dot position, which is a vector3 of the clickable object's position. We'll put in a comma since the vector3 dot distance method asks for that, and we will put in the target dot transform dot position as well. Okay, while the distance between the clickable object and the player is greater than clickable object dot activate distance, which is the activate distance that we put on each of our clickable objects, then we want to bide time until the distance is less than or equal to the activate distance. So I'm going to put some curly brackets, and we will put that code here. And because this is a coroutine and enumerator, we can ask it to wait. It's a special function where you can literally wait the time away instead of the function executing as fast as the computer can possibly execute it. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to ask it to yield and return after. We're going to ask it to yield and return after a new wait for seconds. Suspends the coroutine execution for the given amount of seconds using scaled time. Wow, that's exactly what we want. And I'm just going to put in a value here of 0.1 seconds. If you wanted, you could do something like, you could do wait for end of frame if you wanted to update this more frequently. You could do basically any of these functions that it tells you to. I like wait for seconds 0.1, but it might not be as precise as you want it to be. So you could do wait for end of frame like this function down here. While the distance is farther away than the activate distance on the clickable object, then we're just going to wait for 0.1 seconds. So now we want to say what happens if the player does indeed get within the activate distance. And what we want to happen is what this script already does, which is execute the block when you click on something. So we're going to end up putting all of this in our next if statement. So it's going to look very similar if, and I am going to go ahead and copy paste this line into the parentheses, and I am just going to turn this around into a less than or equal sign. Okay, So if the distance between the clickable object and the player is less than the activate distance, then I'm going to make parentheses here, and I am going to copy and paste all this into here. So as you can see here, there's an asterisk on both of my scripts, which mean I haven't saved either of them. So before we test it, go ahead and save with Control S or Command S on Mac. And let's go see if I did this right the first time. First thing we're going to want to do is go to our clickable before we test and set an activate distance. I'm going to go with 0.2, which is sort of a 20 pixel wide circle in my case because my pixels are worth 0.01 unity units. And I am just going to go in and try this out bravely. I'm going to make sure to go far away from my clickable object so that I can see for sure if it works. And it didn't work. So I think I know what's going on here. And it's that the position of my collider and the position of my desk clickable are not remotely the same, unfortunately. Which we can go and we can see the representation of where it thinks our desk clickable is. And it's the activate distance is a circle around this point, this transform position. So what I should do is I should go up here and I should reset the transform of this. And I'll go ahead and I'll do it not in play mode so it saves these changes. I'm going to reset the transform, which resets to down here because our parent desk object is 0, 0, 0. And I am going to make sure that I put the desk clickable. I'm going to drag it to be right in the center of our desk. And now I'm going to have to edit the box collider because as we can see, it's moved down here. Okay, and now when we go back in, let's check and see if our activate distance is helping us out any better than it was before. Result is quite good. Unfortunately, we are still walking during dialogue, but I set my activate distance to a nice 0.5, as you can see here. And even if I click on the outer edges of this object, of my clickable zone, then I still have dialogue with it. But what I want to happen is for my player to stop walking as soon as I enter the activate distance. So let's go ahead and make that change in our script. So if we are within the activate distance, then we want to disable our player's movement. And there should be a pretty simple way to do this. What we can say, we want to be within these brackets of the if statement. And what we should say here is target dot follow spot. It appears our follow spot on our player is not public. So let me go in and make the private vector2 follow spot, which saves the coordinates of where we click on screen. And I am going to go ahead and make that public. I'm going to save this script. We're going to go back into the object clicked script. And now I can reference this follow spot. I'm going to say target.followSpot equals target.transform.position. And what that is going to do is when we click an object, when we get within the activate distance, the point where we clicked on screen, as soon as we get into the activate distance, will snap back to being inside our player. Now, we will still be able to move our player, even though the point will get snapped back to wherever the player is. So they'll temporarily pause, but still, when you click the dialog box, the player is going to move to where the dialog box is. So we need to create a new variable in our player script over here, and we are going to call it in dialog. So we're going to make a public variable so that we can access it from our object clicked script. It's going to be a Boolean variable, which will hold a true or false value. And we are going to name it in dialog because we want to know, are we in dialog or are we not? Have we clicked an object and are we within the activate distance or are we not? And so over here in our object clicked script, we are going to say target dot in dialog equals true. Now this doesn't do anything yet because we haven't used our in dialog variable to do anything in our player movement script, in our target script. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I'm going to move over to our target script, to our point and click controller that we've made. And in this update method where we have stored our method for moving the player, in fact, we are going to want to put all of this that I've highlighted inside the if statement, because during dialogue or during a cutscene, we are going to want to update the animation ourselves, perhaps. You know, if there's any handshaking or sword fighting or whatever there is in point-and-click adventure games, we're not going to want it to update the animation based on the angle that we clicked on screen because we don't want to click anywhere on screen during that time. And luckily, Fungus can handle animation during cutscenes very easily. So we can put all this in an if statement and say if we're not in dialogue, then we can do all of this stuff. And the shorthand for that is if parentheses exclamation point in dialogue. Or we could just as easily say if in dialogue is not equal to true. So that's two ways to say the same thing. We're going to put curly brackets, and I am going to copy and paste all this stuff into there. I still think we want to adjust the sorting layer even when we're in a cutscene because that will help maintain the 3D illusion. Okay, now I'm going to save this and let's see if it works first try. So it successfully stopped me, but it stopped me on the animation that I was performing when I reached the activate distance, which we would not prefer. And it stopped us from returning to pointing and clicking around and moving our character because we did not set the in dialog variable back to true. So these are things we want to do, but success, we have stopped our player when in dialogue. We just need to start them again and set them to an appropriate idle animation. So I'm going to go in here in the object clicked script. And the reason I don't want to do this in the target script, because I could go in here and I could say else, like if we are in dialogue, then I want you to play idle animation. But if I do it here, it will force us into idle animation every frame because update is called once per frame. So if I do it once in object clicked, then every cutscene will start with a solid baseline of your player is just in their idle animation, and you can change it after that. So I'm going to reference the animator that is on the target script, which is not public, so I'm going to go back in the target and I'm going to make it public. Save that once you make it public, and I am going to call a function target.animator.setFloat, and we have two floats that control our animator right now, the angle we're walking and the distance that we are from the point that we're walking to. So here, in order to make us idle, we want to set the distance to 0 to make us idle. So we're going to set float distance to 0f. This will make us idle at whatever angle we were just walking at, and that should be groovy. So the last thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go into our player script and probably somewhere here at the end of our script, we're going to want to make a public method that we can call in Fungus to put us back out of dialog so that we can move again. So this will be a public void called exit dialog. And it will be a very simple method where we will set in dialog back to false. And I'll show you how to call it in Fungus after we save. In fact, what we should do is we should create a new block, and we should call it the exit block. And every time we want to exit dialog, we should go to this block, which we'll call a method. If you go down here, hit the plus button, and go down to scripting, you'll go to invoke method. And here we'll need to drag in the game object that the method is in, which is the player game object. Target component is the target script, and the method is exit dialog, which is our only public method on the target script. And this should set that in dialog variable back to false so that we can move again. And so what we need to do at the end of our clickable objects is we need a flow command call. And this will call a different block in the flowchart if you are new to Fungus. And we're going to want to call the exit block, and then we'll stop the block's progress. Okay, now let's see if our changes are successful or not. So, unfortunately, even though the follow spot gets back to where the player was, the nav mesh agent still has a destination set. So there's one last thing we have to do to ensure our nav mesh agent still has their destination set. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that the agent has a new destination when we click on the object. Just putting the follow spot back on the player was not good enough. So this means at the top of our object clicked, we need to add a private nav mesh agent variable so that we can talk to the nav mesh agent on our character. But it doesn't understand nav mesh agent because we're not using the unityengine.ai namespace. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, paste it in the next line, and add .ai. And immediately it will understand nav mesh agent that I'm talking about. And I'm going to name it agent. If you have more than one nav mesh agent in your scene, this method will not work unless we are going to get a component off the target. So that if you have multiple nav mesh agents in your scene as NPCs, if you want, then we can only get this nav mesh agent off the player and stop the player's destination instead of stopping some random NPC's destination accidentally. So down here where we returned the follow spot to the player, we still want to do that, and we're going to want to set in dialog to true before we return the follow spot and we stop the agent's destination. Because if we don't, the destination might get set by the update method before we stop it with this in dialog variable. So I'm going to say agent.set destination, and it's going to ask for a vector 3. So because we want to set the agent's destination to where the player is at that moment, we are just going to put target.transform.position. And that should have the agent simply stay in place until it's given a new destination. We'll move the follow spot to the player, and we'll make sure they idle animate. Let's go test this out. Okay, we're walking to the corner. we're clicking on it. Oh, and voila, we stop. We can't seem to walk anywhere else, and we're in our idle animation. We click on the dialogue, and can we move again? Yes, we can. How glorious. And we freeze in the idle animation that we stop in, and then we can move again. That's awesome. The only thing that's finicky about this method, I've worked on this pretty hard to make it pretty optimized of a workflow for people. The only thing that I think could be improved is this activate distance here. The fact that you have to figure out what activate distance you want for every clickable object in your game just by trial and error. I think that could be a little bothersome if you're making a big game or you want to save time somewhere. I think perhaps you could make it so that when you enter a trigger area on a box collider on the clickable object, then your character executes the block and such. But this is the solution that I came up with. It took me a bit of time, but that would be my advice if you're looking to optimize this, is to add another collider of some sort to this script, and you click is trigger, and that collider, basically it acts as the activate distance, but you get to shape it visually in the scene tools and with the collider editor, and that could be a little bit easier than the trial and error of choosing the number yourself and playing around with it in play mode. Okay, that's it for today's video. There's an easy built-in way to change the cursor as it hovers over a clickable object if you want to give the players feedback on what's a clickable object and what's just another place I can walk, which I think that's a useful bit of feedback. I could do the Monkey Island thing where it gives you the name of the thing that you're hovering over. You know, it says walk to Pirate Steve or whatever when you hover your cursor over it. Or I could cover the verb table that's a part of Monkey Island. I could create a custom shader that outlines whatever your cursor is hovering over. Please leave a comment and let me know what else you might want from this Monkey Island tutorial series, because next time I'm planning on starting on the inventory for Monkey Island. I'm planning on making an inventory where you can combine two items together, where you can use items on any clickable object in the environment or a person that might be standing in the environment as well, which is basically a clickable object. And I'll be making it so that you can't move when you open the inventory, and that you go back to whatever dialogue you were in when the inventory closes if you were in dialogue when you opened the inventory. So if there's anything specific you're looking for in an inventory, please let me know and I'll try to get to it. Until next time, stay jolly.